We have a moment of silence to just reflect on gratitude and remember the addict is still suffering in or outside of this hall, and those addicts all over the world that don't even have NA yet and are struggling to find us.
As we visit together, we need to have one camera,
Yeah.
set it up, and talk.
Yeah.
And we've had some pretty powerful discussions in the last 2 days.
It's,
And I think it's part of how this whole project is going to come together.
mhm.
So,
I think it is about that now.
Yeah.
And that's different.
yeah, it's different, yeah. I think we've got the information. Now we need to put it together in a form that is going to impact Narcotics Anonymous, not for a year or 2 years, but forever. And that it'll be something that won't be here today and gone tomorrow.
Yeah.
Something that will have a long-term impact on the newcomers and to hopefully change their heart from a heart of steel to a heart of flesh. Jimmy actually started here, and back in the back there, they used to get together, guys that had drug problems along with their alcohol problems would sometimes meet in a back room, and sometimes they would meet out here in this little patio in the back, and there was tables there, and they would talk and share their experience, strength, and hope about other things other than alcohol.
Okay, my name's Phil,
Uh-huh,
and I'm an addict.
uh-huh,
And I live on Vashon Island,
uh-huh,
up in the state of Washington.
uh-huh.
And I came into my first NA meeting.
And how old were you then?
I was about 14,
Wow.
and it was at the Radford Clubhouse in North Hollywood, California.
The AA Clubhouse.
The AA Clubhouse. And they told me to go into the back room. And I went in through the kitchen. And I later remembered that was a patio with a table.
Right.
I think you reminded me of that last night. But it's kind of hard to remember back in those days. But I do remember a lady named Sylvia that was there, and I don't remember the other people's names.
Hey Jim, so tell us a little bit about, well, as much as you know about the history of this little corner here at the North Hollywood AA Club and these tables here, these blue tables.
Yeah, when I came in 1992, I would go to meetings here, and there were a bunch of people hanging out, playing cards out here, and we were always told that was the old timers. They had a lot of time, and they didn't want to go to every meeting, and they sat out here, and they had their little social club out here, and they played cards. And that's and I saved these ones when Radford moved, the North Hollywood group moved. They took the benches with them, but eventually I got the benches back. They called me and they said they were going to throw the benches out. Did I want them? So I drove up to where they had moved, and they were in an alleyway, and I got the benches back. And I saved the table, and I think there was another set of benches and tables that were lost. But I saved these, and these are the original blue color that Radford was painted. For years, Radford was painted a bright blue, big book blue. Yeah, one time the guys came by and painted the whole clubhouse blue. So this is the same color they used. Yeah.
So that's a real piece of history there, The color, for one thing. And actually this is where Jimmy Cannon and some of the old timers came back here, and they sat and they began to do some planning about Narcotics Anonymous, and guys in the like Cy Malis and some of the other fellows that I don't even know now would people that had drug problems along with alcohol problems would get together and said, what are we going to do to help the guys that have drug problems, you know? And so this is a real intricate part of history, because this is from this point, then the Radford Street, Roads and Moore Park meeting developed, and then it began to grow. But the roots are right here in the North Hollywood Club, and especially with these blue tables. These are the roots that begin to grow and get nutrition and depth that add to the fruit of Narcotics Anonymous. It's developed some beautiful fruit at this time. But this is where the seedling was. This is where the roots developed, right here. So and I want to really thank Jim for having the love and compassion in us. In his heart to allow us to come in here and take a look and remember what went on and be able to record some history. You don't run into people like Jim every day, you know. They're 1 in 1,000. And I think the good Lord is bringing people to us because He wants a history to be remembered. And we're all a part of it. And we run into people like Jim that now becomes an integral part of the history of Narcotics Anonymous. Let's take a look through at the main meeting hall, and this is where we went into the main meeting hall. Of course, it's a lot different now, but the stage was up there, and there were just 2 or 3 steps up to the stage, and there was chairs out here, and everybody would get up there and participate, and it was people that would volunteer to participate, and mostly the people that volunteered were people with time on the program. It was sort of an unwritten rule that newer people didn't get up. You came and you sat down and you listened to the older people. And then over here, there was an office right in the corner that was occupied by Alabama, who was the secretary of the group here, and she seemed like she was always here and always willing to help, and seemed like she knew everybody, and if anybody that needed help in any way, she always had a connection to help the people. From that place, from here, we started going on Friday nights over to Roads and Moore Park to the mother group, and then Bill and Zona had a place over in Burbank, a little apartment where we used to go in an alley to get to their apartment, and so we had those 2 meetings, and the rest of the meetings were right here at the North Hollywood AA Club, and we went to meetings every single night. People would go from miles around, even if they had AA meetings in their area, to come here to the North Hollywood Club, because there was a certain comfort and understanding that was here, that they cared about everybody. They cared about people that had problems other than alcohol. And I think because of Jimmy Cannon, that they realized that he was a guy that had put his life back together, and he had problems with drugs other than alcohol. Marty was one of the guys that was there at Radford Street shortly after I came, and knows a lot of the people there that I knew, and I don't know many people that are left.
No, there aren't many.
No, not many. The North Hollywood Club was very supportive of NA. And we would go in there, we would talk, and the NA, Jimmy Kennan, the founder of NA, would always tell us, hey, when you go in there, you listen to this guy, and that guy, like Cy Malis and some of the old timers. He would tell us, addicts, who to listen to. You don't have to talk, just sit next to these guys and listen to what they say.
I'm trying to think of the guy, I can't think of his name, from San Gabriel there, Midnight Auto Supply, he used to call himself.
Oh, yeah.
He was always up.
Yeah.
I used to go travel just to hear him talk
Uh-huh.
because I was new and I knew he couldn't be up all the time.
Right.
And he
yeah.
was always up.
Wow.
I mean, his
Yeah.
attitude was unbelievable.
Wow.
You know, so.
So anyway, this is a little history of the old days, you know, that are fading away. But here's part of Marty's solid member, you know, since that time, and it's a pleasure to meet with him and to share some of the old days. This is where the kitchen was, where you'd always see Jimmy Kennan at the bottom of the sink there washing cups and getting the new people like myself to give him a hand. But he was a guy that was a leader. He would start the washing process and then turn it over to the newcomers. Over here, as we progress this way, there was a wall right here between the sanctuary and this room. And this was our meeting room here. We had one large table that came from this end down to about where the fireplace is over here. And right here, where this fireplace is, and so this is right here. We put the chairs around the table, and there was probably enough room for maybe 15 people. Boy, it's hard for me to talk about this because I can just picture myself sitting down, and especially at Christmas time, we had a Christmas party. The very first NA Christmas party was held here. And it wasn't a party, we didn't have gifts. What we had was food. It was a Christmas dinner. And I remember a couple guys were here, a guy named Frank. I think he was Frank was a chiropractor. Another guy by the name of Alton from Santa Monica. Of course, Jimmy was here at that time, and Tilly and I and our kids, and Ron and Kathy, and well, maybe Ron and Kathy, I'm not sure if they were here yet, no. So anyway, well, that was it, and this was our meeting hall, and the memories, and started right here, and NA actually started right here. Nobody stuck in Narcotics Anonymous from 1953 until 62. And in 62, I came, there were some people here that were coming and going, like Pepe and Penny, and I'm not sure. But I was on my way to Synanon in 62 when I came here, and Jim and Pepe went to Synanon in 62 and came out in December of 62 and came back to NA and never left again. And so 62 was, Jack Whaley was here, Phil Phillips, Slick Phil, Paul Stewart, who never quite made it, and but we lost contact with Phil Phillips. Bob McLaughlin was here, and as far as we know, he's still doing all right, but we've lost contact with him. Dick Herbst was the first guy I sponsored. I picked him up. Jimmy told me to go to Shire's Dryer. There was a guy there that needed some help, and I went and I seen Dick there in bed, and I invited him to NA, and he came and stayed, and as far as I know, he's still doing fine, but we haven't seen him for quite a few years. It was a happy year, and in a way it wasn't a happy year because we've seen some real hardships. We had another fella that came on a Friday night meeting right here and he came for about a month, and he had such hatred in his heart. He worked for a veterinarian, and he says, I can't stand this guy. He mistreats the animals, and he says, I just felt like killing this guy. And he didn't show up on a Friday night. On Saturday morning, we read the paper, and he did kill the veterinarian, stabbed him to death, because he couldn't get over his resentment. That spurred a lot of us on to work the steps, to realize it is a matter of life and death. A resentment can kill you. We hear that a lot, but it's the truth. It's the truth. We've seen it in '62. There was a lot of things that happened in '62 that made an impact on us. There was, Netta and her husband Tom came during that time. As far as I know, Netta's still doing well. Tom called me in the middle of the night one night and had taken a gun and shot. He's while his wife was in the bed, shot a dozen shots around the bed, and then he said he was going to kill his mother-in-law. And he called me at midnight. She called me, and I talked to him, and I went over. I said, just go outside, I'll pick you up. I said, go out there and sit outside on the curb. And sure enough, I went over and picked him up and tried to get him in the mental psychiatric hospital, and that didn't work for him. Anyway, so that was Netta's husband. As far as I know, Netta did well, and Netta was also went to the meeting on Rhodes and Moore, not Rhodes and Moore Park, but at Bill and Zona's place down there in Burbank off of Magnolia. This was like a big meeting hall here where we had 15 people. It was meant a lot to us to have a large group, but then there was a small group, maybe 6 to 10 people at Bill and Zona's place. And then, like I say, it was sad. They stopped the meeting, and Zona got murdered, and Bill went back to the penitentiary and said that he couldn't stay clean, and as much as he wanted to, and we never heard from him again. But that was some of the history about 1962. It was a great time for a lot of us, a sad time for others, very sad. For the families of people that died, And then Scott Cronlin was here. Scott had been supposedly clean from 54 to 59, and then he started using again. And and Russ Counts was here. Russ was in and out, but then by the end of 62 or maybe 63, he got clean and stayed clean. And and Roger Cronlin, he was in and out, helped in 62 and helped start the ad center with Sylvia. And Sylvia was here in 62, and they went up to start the ad center in Berkeley. And so anyway, this is where it all started, right here at the Unitarian Church on Rhodes and Moore Park. And I thank God we met with this old guy, Marty, here, who had 40 years and was around narcotics, around the Radford Street at that time, and in the late 60s, and knew a lot of the people that we knew. And Radford Street was tremendously supportive of the NA program. Well, I just want to say a little prayer that the Lord will free me from any self-centeredness and ego and self-importance, and allow me to tell my story as truthfully as possible, and with the intention not to bring credit to myself, but to bring hope to the new people that are coming. And not only hope for them, but to talk about the basics, the way it used to be, the way people end up having the amount of time that I have, 40 or 30 years or someplace in there, and how we did it. And I think basically is, I don't think we had a lot of desires for anything else besides staying clean. There wasn't a lot of advertisement about things and toys and pornography and all that kind of stuff that draws people now away from a spiritual way of life. The only thing that we had was the God of our understanding and our fellow man.
NA is like that. There's certain people that got this program in their heart, not just in their head, and they never give up. They'll always be there. So that's an important thing. I hope that, I don't know where this video is going, but gosh, if somebody's looking at this thing for the very first time and wanting to know what NA is all about, it's about a lot of individual people who have made a lot of progress through mistakes. Learned from the mistakes, developed a way of life that doesn't include drugs or anything else, studied the basic text, cleaned out the wreckage of the past, and moved on with their life. Moved on and give it away to the next person that stands before them.
Jimmy's done a great thing, and for society, for humanity. I mean, that little spark in 1953 that started now has magnified itself into a tremendous organization. It's all because that one man, very simple guy.
I was looking at my big AA book, and I took it to a Hollywood meeting, I think it was in '59, I'm not sure. And I had it signed by some of the people there, and Jimmy signed it, and Sylvia. So by that time, Cy was gone. Cy was around about a year then or something, and I don't know what happened there exactly.
That's what we're trying to find out too. So you don't know the rift between Jimmy and Seth?
There was a rift between Jimmy and Cy.
Yeah.
Personalities.
Yeah, I mean, Cy was a great white leader type, tells you what to do type. And Jimmy was laid back, ask me and I'll tell you what I know. But, so I mean, Cy was kind of like one of those overpowering personalities, you know what I mean? And that you see around the program, and they gather all the attention. And they're considered leaders.
So anyway,
but
Sylvia and Penny were the first women that you know about that were involved in the program.
no, there were women.
Other women.
Well, I mean, there were women coming to the program,
Yeah, but I mean.
I'm trying to think of some that stayed clean, and that's not so hard to remember. That's not so easy to remember. But there were a lot of women that came in and out. Yeah, Sylvia got active, and she was working with women. She had been to prison, maybe Lexington, I'm not sure.
Sylvia Wexler.
Wexler. And she was working with women, and she would bring people to the meeting, and she was active, and she helped out with things. I don't know if she was like secretary for a while or something. And that was after the dryer, after the Shire's dryer thing folded. We got a meeting there on Moore Park, the one on Moore Park at the Unitarian Church that was going for quite a few years. And so that's the period when Sylvia was there and brought different people into the program.
So the meeting at Rhodes and Moore Park, or Studio City, that was activated around 1960?
I'm trying to think of some way of, I think so, because it seems to me like, I remember that when I first came back to the meeting, like in the first part of 60, let's see, I got busted 58. I got out in 58, I got busted 58. went to that meeting on 59. It was right at the new year of 59. And at that time, the meeting was at Shire's Dryer. And later that year, I think that Shire's meeting folded, and I can't remember the circumstances, and Cy kept, went away, and, no, Cy didn't either. I'm thinking more, well, I can't really remember for sure. Because I'm trying to think when they had that television thing on Channel 4, and Cy, I remember them interviewing Cy, and they had the cameras there, and just, he had his face in the shadow, so his face didn't show.
And that was involved with NA?
Yeah, but I mean, it was more about Cy than it was about NA. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But they were talking about Narcotics Anonymous,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Cy was, like you said, great
It was like, here's this guy this addict that's trying to form this group, this heroic individual trying to, it's really more about the hero figure than about the group.
Help me out. Was this the time when, in 1959, when Narcotics Anonymous pretty much died out?
I didn't think that, as far as I know, it never really died out. There was always a meeting going on, at least one meeting, Seems to me like we went from Shires and then got Jimmy. I think Jimmy's the one that arranged for the meeting place in Moore Park. I'm not sure about that. But all I remember is I know that in 59, when I first started going, the first meetings I went to were at Shires, and then later on we were going to Moore Park. So I think it must have been the year when we shifted from Shires to Moore Park, and from the Cy Malis era, so to speak, to Jimmy.
And who was running?
Now, Cy had been around, they've been around a few years. Like I said, they carried the program in to where I was at. That was my first acquaintance with NA. And that was in 57. So, I mean, Cy, that group had been around there at the Shires thing, and Scott and them, they'd been around for a few years working. And Jimmy was, I know Jimmy was there, but, I know exactly what role he was playing. I wasn't there.
This is the area here, and particularly over to my right from where I'm sitting now. Sitting right in this place right here many years ago, and trying to organize my own thoughts in order to try to understand the program we had, in order to try to see if what I was doing was right for me as well as anybody else, and to see if I could find maybe a better direction, maybe some more positive aspects of looking at the program, since you know as well as I do how depressing some of even our meetings can become. We start off on a negative note, we can carry it through.
I've heard that in the beginning, Narcotics Anonymous was, pretty much strictly for bad alcoholics and heroin addicts.
Yeah, what I'm saying, the bad guys. That's what I'm saying. We had a reputation of being bad guys.
Convict.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Misfit.
Right.
Misfit. Yeah. And sometimes we held it up by, not, I don't say pretending to be, held it up by kind of like our attitude. Don't fuck with us. We're following our own script, especially if you're using, you're participating in illegal activities, and you're chasing the drug, and you're chasing the connection, you're chasing money, you're chasing everything, you're chasing everything. So it gets you get lost sometimes. You're talking about in terms of what happened or what didn't happen. You get lost in the shit that was going on,
The big job, I've been very fortunate. In fact, I've always been sort of optimistic. I've always been on the upside. I'm a speeder. Thank God, so is Betty. We get along well in that regard. And I used to try to wonder, what can we do to make it any better? What can we do to improve? And I thought, from what I've learned of the program, is what I learned And what I'm able to offer to other people is most important. Not trying to do things for other people. They're supposed to do things for themselves. Just offer the opportunity. Offer your support. Offer your empathy in particular. Empathy in particular, because it seems as though at times we forget, we get so tied into trying to do something for somebody, you know. We're not saviors, we're not teachers, we're not preachers. We're only people who have recovered our own life, our own sanity, our own health. And this is what we can offer to other people, only an example. I think we get hung up on that sometimes.
All right, so then you get out of prison. What was your first move?
Go see the parole officer. as they instruct you to do. And get some papers signed and some places you're supposed to meet and places you're supposed to go and where you're supposed to report and all the, you know, the whole script you need to follow in order to, you know, to keep the parole officer off your back, you know. And not that they approve so much, they want to know where you're going and what you're doing, you know. And one of them was I was going to these here meetings called Narcotics Anonymous, you know. And they kind of frowned at it at first because they thought that they had all the answers as to how to deal with dope fiends and convicts and so forth. And you didn't know what you was talking about anyhow. And those places were not sanctioned by the department of anybody, you know. And so they kind of frowned at, you know, what you were doing. It's, you know, they ignored it, but it has a lot to do with how the parole officer perceived what you were doing as being valuable or not valuable.
They had no perception of that.
No, they had nothing to go by. What they got to go by, you know?
Right.
And it's kind of a new area in some ways. They probably some of the officers and so forth knew of NA or AA and those types of things and a close association because there were groups going into institutions, but there were AA meetings. There weren't no NA meetings going in. So they were working on other solutions in terms of how to do this thing, you know, reporting and writing letters and getting a job and holding a job, all of the above.
Gene Lukakis, the clean date, May 19th, 1964. I was from Los Angeles.
Okay.
You need more?
No,
Okay.
that's fine.
Hey, when did I first meet you, Gene?
In 1964.
In '64 at what meeting?
God, I don't remember.
Must have been Rhodes and Moore Park.
The first meeting I went to, you want me to tell you the first meeting I went to? Okay. First meeting I met a guy named Paul Stewart. I've been walking for 4 days clean. And I paused and I walked from LA to the San Fernando Valley, San Fernando. And it occurred to me, I remembered stories in institutions, you know, the AA guys would come in. And that's going to offend some people, but, you know, anyway, that's where I first heard about recovery. And they all talked about going to the Sally or the Mission or something, so I figured I had to walk back to LA. I figured the Mission had to be on Main Street. And I got to North Hollywood, and I was real tired. I sat back on a bus bench, you know, and the two cops drove by real slow and looked at me, and I got up and went through the building, across the alley, and 4 blocks later I was on the roof until they did a shift change. And it occurred to me I better see if there was an Alano Club. I could get a cup of coffee and nobody would ask me where I came from, what my last name was, or where I was going. So I went to the North Hollywood Alano Club on Radford Street. Paul Stewart was there. And he kept looking at me and said, "I know you." And I said, "No, you don't." And then he asked me if I'd been in jail. I said, "Yeah, once." God. I got over 30 felony convictions, but anyway, I said once. And he said, "Where were you?" And I said, "At the Wayside Honor Farm." And he asked me what compound I was on. I said, "The upper compound." He pointed and said, "You're a dope fiend." And I got up to leave. And he came followed me out and he said, I got something for you. And I thought he was going to turn me on, and I didn't know if I was going to get loaded or hit him. And he handed me a white book, a little white booklet, that's the only booklet we had. And I said, that don't work. And he said, yes, it does. He'd been clean. I think he said 5 years. And he said there were about a dozen people going to meetings, and they had 2 meetings a week in LA. And he said, I said, I'd like to see that. And he said, come home with me and I'll take you to a meeting. And it was on a Saturday night, so he took me to the Nest to an AA meeting, because there was no NA meeting. And then I met, you want last names or no?
Doug Bingham.
Yeah, Doug Bingham, Dick Herbst, Scotty somebody.
Scott Crown. Scott?
No, not Big Scott.
No.
This was another guy. He didn't have much time. Can't remember his name. And Phil, Filthy Phil, Glenn Phillips.
Slick Phil, yeah.
Yeah, Slick Phil. Yeah. Anyway, so I met them.
They were all at the Nest.
Yeah.
And so that was an AA meeting,
At an AA meeting.
but the NA
all
people.
the NA went there. All the junkies from the West Valley
Right.
went to that meeting. He told me, Paul told me, there's no meeting tonight, but I'll take you to one where the addicts go.
My name is Vito L. My clean date is 2/14/1960. And right now I live in the South Broward area of the South Florida region.
Thank you. Where'd you get clean? How'd you get here? So let's go to the beginning.
Well, we'll go to the beginning. We'll go to the beginning when I walked out of a dumpster. I had started using at a very, very early age in the Bronx. And it ended in, I don't know if it's even there anymore. It was Brick Church Station in East Orange, New Jersey. And I was laying in the gutter, the snow was falling, it was covering me, and people were just walking over me like I didn't exist. And evidently somebody had some empathy, called a ambulance. I went to the emergency room. The doctors took a look at me. They didn't want to touch me because I was covered with body lice. And so they had the nurses, of course, delouse me. And when they finally diagnosed me, they told me I was suffering from both infectious and serum hepatitis for the dirty living, dirty needles. And they put me in what was known as the isolation ward. And when I got out of the isolation ward, they took me upstairs on the elevator, and I got off, and I seen this big room with bed after bed after bed, some card tables, and people standing there in green gowns. And I remember I said to the nurse, what the heck is this place? And she said, why, this is an alcoholic ward. And I took one look at her and said, I dare you put me with them kind of sick people. Because I figured they had a problem, they couldn't stop drinking, and of course I could stop using anytime I wanted to, and that was my words to her. And her words to me was, then why didn't you? I didn't know what to say. So she says, if you don't want to go there, take your brown paper bag and you can take the elevator down and go wherever you're going. And it was still like March, and you know how it is up north, it was still cold. I'm not a fool. And I went in there. And that facility, even though there was no treatment, changed my life. During the week on a Wednesday night, a bunch of people came in and brought a meeting from AA. And I really didn't want to attend that, but I was told that if I didn't attend it, I'd take my brown paper bag and leave. So I stayed and I attended it. So I started to listen to these guys when they came in. And it was mostly guys because there wasn't very many women in that fellowship then. And when it was time for me to get out of there, I still was homeless, and they gave me this meeting list. And they told me go to meetings, and they told me they had coffee and donuts, and when you're homeless, that's a great thing, coffee and donuts.
And my name is Ronald Edward Mentor, and I was clean 6/17/64. Although I came to Narcotics Anonymous about a year prior to that at the Walla Walla State Prison. And I was clean since that date, but I don't count jail time. My sponsor kind of told me when I got out, you're clean from today, and that's why I've counted it from today. I live now in Leisure World, California, which is a retirement center for elderly people like me, down in 60 miles south of Los Angeles. Well, like always, I was doing either prison time or out there on the streets hustling. I've been involved with drugs since I was 8 years old, and had been a heroin addict from the time I was 13. I don't know if you want the information about what happened in my life, but at 17, I was sentenced to prison to the electric chair. And spent 17 months on death row in Texas and got a reprieve. The federal government took over my case. It was a question of who was legally responsible, the state or the government. And they sentenced me to triple life, and I went to Alcatraz. And I spent 7 years in Alcatraz, and I was released on a California state appellate court, a blunder, and of course the normal thing when you got out of prison was to find your little cutie pot and all them things like that, but not me. I wanted to find some drugs. And I took the little boat across to San Francisco and I got loaded. And I stayed loaded for 18 and 19 months. And I got involved, went back to prison in Walla, Washington. And while I was doing time there was a guy who was just floating up and down the coast, kind of introducing NA to people. And he came to the prison, and he said, "I'd like to start an NA meeting there." We had an AA meeting, and my parole officer or my penal supervisor at the time said, "You know, Ed, you need to go there." He said, "Because you don't really have a problem with living, you have a problem with drugs." And I didn't think I had a problem with drugs. Hell, I love drugs. I didn't have any problem with heroin. I'd done everything I wanted to do. It took care of everything. But I went to this first meeting, and this guy's talking about staying clean, and I thought he was a little cuckoo. And he left the pamphlet. We only had a little small pamphlet, and I read it, and he told me, "Ed, you're not going to get much out of this, but you need to go to the AA meeting, because they have a big book that gives you a lot of information about our program." So I did, and it sounded interesting, but I had no reason at all to believe that I could stay on the streets clean.
My name is Sally E. My clean date is 9/1/1969.
And so, Sally, tell me about your introduction to Narcotics Anonymous.
Well, I'd spent a year in Alcoholics Anonymous trying to make it, and I couldn't do it. I'd get a few weeks. One time I think the most I got was 6 weeks. And the first meeting that I went to, I was so scared and so desperate that I just wanted something other than, I had to do something. I couldn't stand, I always used drugs because they reduced the pain of living. They helped me deal with the pain of living. And they weren't working anymore. Not only were they weren't working, but it was worse. I was miserable, abjectly miserable when I was loaded, and abjectly miserable when I was clean. And so I wandered into AA because somebody told me that that was where I should go. And the first meeting, 3 people came over and told me I couldn't talk about drugs. I looked really bad. You gotta figure my clothes, I had like 2 changes of clothes, and they were both kind of, I was kind of dirty, and I twitched and jerked, and they kind of cleared, sometimes they cleared the space around me, so people would move. And so, but when I would get loaded, it would be horrible, and then I would come back and try AA again, because I heard them say that was a way of life, and so that I just couldn't get it. And finally she wasn't anywhere near as old as I am, but I thought she was old, in her little polyester dress, her little pearls, her little heels and stuff, came up to me and said, "Dear, there's a place for people like you." And I said, I was thinking in my head, yeah, right, I know. I've been in those places. I know exactly what you're talking about, jails and institutions. And she said, and she must have read my panic. And she said, "No, there's a program for people like you." And she gave me this guy's card, Dave Brown, and he lived in Anaheim. And she said to call him because it was a program of Narcotics Anonymous. And I carried that guy's card around for, 5 or 6 weeks anyway, because I was afraid to call. I was afraid if he blew me off, I thought it was my last shot. And finally, just in desperation, after getting loaded one more time, I called him. And he came all the way from Anaheim to where I lived in Costa Mesa. I was living in this garage. Anyway, I was living in this guy's garage. Of somebody in AA who had an uncle or something who let me stay in his garage. So he came over and he took me to my first NA meeting. And when people talked there, I knew that they had been where I had been, some of them. Maybe they didn't hear voices, but I felt that I belonged there. That I would never go back to AA. I never went back to AA. And I started staying clean from then on. It was really hard, but I started staying clean.
How much time you got on the program?
I have 39 years.
39. Okay. And what is your clean date?
7/7/70.
7/7. Oh man, that's a good number.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now you came in the program in this area?
Yeah.
In San Jose here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The guy, George P., who I know you've heard about.
Uh-huh.
George
Perry?
Yeah.
Yeah.
George told me, he said, you know, Lou, he said, your game is weak.
Oh, wow.
You got no game, I was living in a business sink hotel in Oakland, called the Alpine Hotel. Rent was, I think it was 10, maybe $10.50 a week. I didn't pay rent.
Oh, yeah.
I stole cigarettes at a supermarket, carton at a time.
Wow.
I lived off of Thompson seedless grapes. And I wasn't going anywhere. And I knew I wasn't going anywhere. And there was no hope for me. I didn't have any hope.
No hope.
State your name and your clean date and where you're from.
I'm Steve B. I'm from Santa Rosa, and my clean date is May 11, '66.
So Steve, where did you first hear about Narcotics Anonymous?
My doctor introduced me to Penny when I was in the hospital. He was treating me for something other than my addiction because it was illegal to treat addiction at the time. And he asked if I wanted to talk to somebody from NA, and I'd never heard of NA, so he explained a little bit about it, and I said, why not? And so Penny Kennedy showed up. She was a nurse at that hospital, and he had helped her get her license back. So she talked with me for a while, and then said that maybe I should be talking to a guy instead of a woman. And, so she told me that a guy named Gene would show up. And Gene showed up that night, and we talked for a while. Told me to give him a call when I got out of the hospital, and he'd take me to a meeting. I had some really good feelings early on, just about kind of that sort of thing, like driving down the Santa Monica freeway from the meeting on Saturday night, and you go out to San Diego to get the direction of where I lived, and I would find all of a sudden I was on PCH, and had missed my turnoff of several miles, and did not even notice that I was so, jacked up on coffee and good feelings after a good meeting. I was thinking, get to those things where I said, well, why me? You know, how did I find this? It's the only place I knew at this time. It was the only place in the world. And here I am, you know, why me? I mean, it was a good why me, not a poor me. And so those are, I guess, little bits of this is it, you know. I found something.
My name is Mel Hellman. Clean date's October the 7th, 1968, Whittier, California. I was scared to death. I was 24 years old. I didn't know what my life was going to be like. And for some strange reason, I believed this program could save my life. If I was just to get out there and do what they suggested for me to do. It's a fact that I haven't used since, so it's saved my life.
My name is Jack White. My clean date is December 15th, 1971, and I got clean in the Los Angeles area, originally from San Diego.
Good deal. Hey, well, Jack, we got some questions. You've been around a long time, you know, and Narcotics Anonymous has changed
It
from
has.
that time a lot. I mean, there was what, like a dozen or 20 meetings or something then, or
Not even that.
10?
Not 10. I think 10 was the outside.
Yeah. So there wasn't many meetings, and now there's hundreds of meetings, 52 countries or something.
Right.
And so NA has changed. Have you changed?
Well, I went from hesitant to open-minded,
Good.
basically.
In the beginning.
Yeah, very hesitant. I had a lot of experience praying where they weren't answered, so I was hesitant because of that. You know. But I believed that them other people who were talking about it believed. And so I was really kind of open-minded. I wouldn't. Jimmy used to slam his hands together and said, "You hear that noise?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "What's that?" I said, "I don't know." He said, "It's your mind slamming shut."
I didn't have a Jimmy's, vision.
Right.
Of this is going to expand all over the whole world, There was nothing like that because I was living in the moment, I mean, even 5 years clean, I'm still acting out my behavior stuff, It took me a long time to cut down the behavior. I got a name out there.
Right.
And sometimes I say, that's not me today, man. That's not me today. But it was like the moment. It was no thinking about tomorrow or what happened just yesterday. I mean, I could retire today and live happily and go all over the world anytime I want to. And that's just on the financial part of it, and the physical part. I'm okay, and the spiritual part, which is the most important part, it's just unbelievable. The patience and tolerance. If I had all that back then when NA was exploding, then I would be in a whole better place, situation. But I didn't have it, because of my old behaviors.
So do you feel that your spiritual experience from the time when you first came in, you had your spiritual experience in Tehachapi,
Right.
and the progression of that to this day now had a lot to do with specifically with the steps, and has it changed a lot?
Well, yeah, it changed a lot because I put a heavier value on those steps. Because, even today, since 1990, my sponsor has a sponsor meeting the third Tuesday of every month, and we go through one step. And we've been doing that since 1990, and I haven't missed too many of those meetings. So we're constantly going over the steps, and then he asked the big question at the end of it. Hope I got the answer. There is no answer, see? It's your experience.
Right.
And yes, there's no, the expectations is just way beyond. you know, way beyond. Because I was just reading a book just not too long ago, and for the 12-step program is one of the fastest spiritual programs of the 20th century. The fastest. And you look at what NA itself has done, and just last night when we were looking at it, you know, on the board, on the screen, it showed only the 4 meetings of the world. And then how's now whether there's 30,000 meetings of Narcotics Anonymous in the world. If somebody would have told me that in 1963, I'd say, get out of here.
This is where the first hotline, I believe, that there ever was to try to help addicts with the ideas that we had at that time. There weren't many of us, that's for sure. But we were willing to try these ideas and see if we could take some kind of a dent in the disaster that was taking place even then in the field of addiction. Things have changed a lot in the intervening years. I don't think we've gotten much better in many ways. We do know that thousands of addicts are walking the streets today that probably wouldn't have made it otherwise. This is only due to the dedication of a lot of people in the intervening years. People who are willing to put aside their own selves, their own self-will and their own ego in order to help others like ourselves. We have moved over a little closer to the house, and what you're looking at, I believe, is what originally was my roofing and later on my painting office. I used to paint and roof in the construction industry here in the valley for many years. And this is where actually the World Service Office, as we know it today, really got its start, because although there had been another World Service Office, and we'll go into detail about that later, down in Crenshaw, in one way or another we wound up in one little part of an office in the Menlo Street area of Los Angeles, in a building that belonged to suicide prevention, which was not really beneficial to our fellowship at all. We wound up moving out of there and into a 1.5 room place over a bail bondsman's office in Van Nuys, about 7 miles to the west of the house here, which didn't even have a parking place for a car. So you couldn't stay in the office more than an hour trying to do anything. We had very little literature and no facilities, honestly, to do much of anything. We used to go out and collect cardboard boxes from behind stores in order to send out the few booklets we had, and do many things like that. Cut up paper bags to wrap some tapes in, or to wrap some booklets in.
Jimmy and I, and Bob Barrett and I, and my brother and I, and even Gene and I, we talk about people. We get letters at the World Service Office from all over the world. And these people looking for Narcotics Anonymous, and we started thinking about, what if? And what if we got in Israel? What if we got in Australia? What if we got in Poland and places like that? But then that's all it was, what if? We responded to every piece of mail that came to the World Service Office. Somebody would respond to it. Jimmy would, I would, Gene has, Greg Pierce would, Bob Barrett did a lot, So it was, and people were hungry for the information.
Terry Ryan, clean date is 6/1/79 from New York City, originally.
And currently?
Heber City, Utah.
Nice. It's beautiful here. What a drive we've had.
When I got clean, there was no Narcotics Anonymous in New York City.
Oh.
So I got clean in that other fellowship and was kind of treated like a moral leper. Oh, you're one of those.
I've heard that NA didn't start growing until some of the members in Southern California broke away and moved to San Francisco.
That move there, Mary Vargas was a social worker, and she worked with the schools.
Who was that?
Mary Vargas.
Mary Vargas.
Like the Playboy
I
cartoons.
don't know about how you spell it, it's just
Vargas.
Vargas, that's all I know.
Okay.
And she used to run up and down the coast here doing social work in terms of working with, kind of like misfits in a sense of speaking, in schools and so forth.
Ah.
And they were giving her a project to work out of Berkeley, University of California, to form some kind of a center that they could study addiction and addicts and so forth. She come down and recruited half of NA out of Southern California, and give them a job. And that's how they went up to Southern California. Yeah, that's right. I got pictures of Sylvia and Russ and them, you know. You know, working for Berkeley at the Ad Center. The Ad Center was, they took, fact is, they had taken our little white book and made their little green and gray book called Ad Center book. So, you know, it's kind of one of these funny things, you know, they didn't change a whole lot in the book. You know, the things were pretty much consistent as to what we was doing with the little white book. But they added into it, you know, trying people in education or something, trying to help the addict, and they the ones that started the meetings in Northern California.
Okay.
First one is, the fact is, one of the oldest meetings in Northern California is one of the meetings that they started in Berkeley. It's still on C Street, I don't know if I know the name of the street now, but it's on C Street in Berkeley, and that meeting's still going on. And from there, it went to Mission Street, Mission in San Diego, in San Francisco, then went back to, what's the town just below?
San Jose.
San Jose. San Jose became a big mainstay because they had a center there. The one that Bill was involved with up there in San Jose.
And then what progressed it, another movement north was Bice, Steve Bice.
Yes, Steve Bice, but at the same time, he moved up there about the same time.
Yeah.
There was
Just a
another
little
fellow
bit later.
that down was in where Salt's the dog Sebastopol.
Oh, that was Steve. He went to Sebastopol.
But he moved it further north.
What did you West Coast old timers think of us East Coast newcomers?
Which ones?
But
y'all was doing two separate things.
I remember when I went to San Francisco in '77, it was like, hey, there's 2 members here from Atlanta for the convention. They
Well,
wanted
see,
to know if
you
I was
didn't
visiting family
see,
or
but
their own
you didn't come across
business.
the Mississippi about certain things, see? Most of the
Okay.
things y'all kept it on the other side of the Mississippi, see, and they had to be bothered with
They're-
I said the people in Jersey, they were rabble rousers. You know, they didn't like nothing nobody else was doing unless it was happening in Jersey.
Well, I had a friend, Maureen, and while I was in prison in New York, she was in prison in Florida, and we were writing back and forth. And she got clean in the joint in Florida. I got clean in the joint in New York. My aunt had 25 years in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I went to Florida to be with her for her anniversary. And after that, I drove down to Fort Lauderdale to meet with Maureen, and she took me to an AA meeting. And then after that, she said, "You want to go to the Narcotics Anonymous meeting?" And I said, "What the fuck is Narcotics Anonymous?" I had no clue.
Right.
So she took me to my first Narcotics Anonymous meeting. I had a year and a half clean. And when I got there, I met this guy, Paul E., was chairing the meeting. He asked me to speak at my first Narcotics Anonymous meeting.
Wow.
You know, and they always told me, you know, when you ask to share, you share. So I basically spoke at my first NA meeting. I had no idea what traditions were at that time. I just knew I was glad to be clean. I had a year and a half clean, you know. And, I met a guy named Joe at that meeting, and at that time he had 10 years clean, and he was a heroin addict, you know. After that meeting, I kept going to meetings down there, and people started putting a bug in my ear. You got to go back to New York and start Narcotics Anonymous and this and that.
When all that crap happened around 4 and 9, that
Trace
was,
is 4-9, the basic test.
yeah.
I don't remember, but I've heard about it.
Initially, 79 wasn't bad. I went to the World Service Conference in 79, it was my first conference, and I liked it. I had a great time. It was really cool. I mean, there was a few testy moments, and another look went to literature for review, and then it went to the fellowship for approval. And literature made 2 small changes. It looked little, like a comma someplace. I mean, just something. I knew in my mind when I saw it that it was something that they needed to do to put their stamp on it. I wasn't on the literature committee at the time, but that's what it was. It wasn't. It didn't mean anything either way. And Jimmy had a fit. I mean, he had a bloody fit.
He wrote that idea.
Yes, and he said if they didn't take it the way he wrote it, he was pulling it, and the fellowship would never see it again. So they approved it the way Jimmy wrote it. It didn't matter. I mean, it didn't amount to a hill of beans.
What's the real story on Jimmy getting locked out of the office?
I think it's in Stone Book, the whole thing, that how it went down. He didn't hire himself.
No.
The conference hired him.
Yeah, that's right.
We had hired Bob Stone to be what do you call him?
Parliamentarian, yeah.
Because we was about to make some directions and some orders
For 2
as
years,
to how
I
to
think
run.
it was.
Huh?
I think Bob Stone was a
Couple of
parliamentarian
years.
for 2 years.
Yeah, I'm saying, a couple of years. And we needed somebody in an official capacity in order to make it proper and correct. And you choose a parliamentarian to make sure that the votes go right and the people are chosen correctly and who got something to say in terms of protest or to carry out after by vote. And you do it just like you do it in the Congress and everything. They have to go by the numbers. It's not because you upset and everybody, you can't please everybody, so to speak. And the choice was made for a number of reasons. It wasn't talking about locking Jimmy out. Once they put Bob Stone in charge, Bob Stone went around and couldn't find the keys to half the locks were in the place, so he had the locks changed, for safekeeping.
The day he got locked out, it was in June of '83, and I only remember that because I just looked it up in my book to be right. And I talked to him that day, and I can tell you he was devastated. He was broken, and he was totally shocked as to why he was locked out of his life's work.
It's obvious that Jimmy had keys to those locks. Was
Well,
he not willing to give?
he couldn't get the keys.
Was
I
he
don't
not
know.
willing to give the keys to Bob Stone?
I have no idea about that part of.
I mean, because there was keys around there, you know.
Well, they probably were, but I mean,
And,
they said a lot of places the locks were not locked.
Or so maybe Jimmy was so offended by what went on, maybe he refused to
No,
give them.
this was one thing. It happened in a kind of orderly procession of the way things. That's the reason Bob was kind of chose, because he was the one capable of organizing some things that Jimmy was not capable of organizing. It's not maybe that's an oversimplification of it, because he had been doing what Jimmy had done for years, you know. the way Jimmy does things. But it wasn't in order in terms of business. And Jimmy, he had found out that the locks had been changed and he had not been given no keys.
Yeah, well, that's the point. Why wasn't Jimmy given a key, you know?
Well,
maybe he stayed home a
hey,
couple
we're
of
talking
days.
about it. Sometimes it takes more than just a click of the finger or a snap of the finger and say it's done.
Well,
I'm just sort of go. Hey, hey.
Loose ends.
Yeah, we're talking about what happened. We're not talking about. I had to be satisfied with what happened. You know. But that's how that happened, and that's how the story gets out. And if somebody builds on that story, huh?
Well, I'll tell you
it's
what.
almost like they go up there. They say,
Yeah.
"Got their 38 special," and say, "Get out of the office."
So what was Jimmy's reaction?
Jimmy was pissed off.
He was saddened by it.
Well, he was more than sad. He was pissed off.
Yeah.
Sad.
Yeah.
I don't know about that sad and stuff. It's soft.
probably sad,
You know why? And I'll tell you why Jimmy was mad. Because it was a lack of respect for the man that had brought NA to that point. And all of a sudden now, you're out to pasture, we'll take over. We know better. We can organize things better than you organized them. And I've been to the warehouse where Jimmy had it. It was organized, but it was his way, and probably not as professional as it was later on. Certainly it wasn't, you know. But the fact is that Jimmy brought everything to that point, you know, and then in a moment, he was out of it. And that's pretty shocking. Pretty shocking. It was shocking to me. Very shocking to me. And I don't think there's a real explanation yet about why all that happened, or the fact that they disrespected Jimmy enough not to come and say, "Hey, Jimmy, we're changing the locks, things are changing, here's a key." You know? I mean, that would have certainly been the respectful thing to do, and it wasn't done.
Well, there was a member designated to do that, which was Chuck G, and he said he couldn't bring himself to do it. And therefore, that's where the loophole occurred. Our expectation with the lit conference and all the lit workers that were just written the basic text was that Jimmy was being given a break where he didn't have to worry about all the clerical crap, and he would stay on as a symbolic leader and spokesperson like he had been doing, and everybody thought he was doing a good job. But he was shocked. I always thought he'd just been out sick for a couple of days and hadn't gotten his key yet. But we all expected him to stay on the office. I mean, if there was never a movement that I heard of to get rid of Jimmy. We never heard that on the East Coast. And I knew of everybody. Just about. And we were like all shocked and saddened by it.
But you see, it's not always what you say. It's not always what you say. It's what actually happens. You know, you can say, "Oh, we didn't intend to that," and we love Jimmy. But the point is that love and appreciation was never manifested itself in something physical. You know, it just wasn't manifest. You can talk about it all day long, but it never showed up.
He was running that office on his Social Security checks. That's how he was paying the rent. And he was eating Campbell's soup. You know, he wouldn't take help from my husband and I when we wanted to take food to him. He was a very proud man.
You know what? The founder of Narcotics Anonymous is Jimmy Kenneth. He's the glue. He's the man that made it happen. If it wasn't for him, and it wasn't for a few other people who remembers the old Bar None. Remember that group?
What's that?
Bar None group out in Santa Monica.
Oh yeah.
We would have never happened. Eventually, we would have because it's in the divine plan. You know, Narcotics Anonymous would happen, but it wouldn't happen at that time. These few people that got together and said there's a need. Our problems aren't all addressed where we're at, which was in May. So it would eventually happen.
I was just shocked, you know, because you know, I never got involved much like Bob did with the organization of politics and the boards and stuff like that. I just, it wasn't my thing, you know.
Your cup of tea.
Yeah, it wasn't my cup of tea, but when I see things changing at that kind of a magnitude, really bothered me, you know. And then I hear some guys were gonna go out and do something about literature, and there was a lot of money involved, the money disappeared, and I thought, man, let's get back to NA, you know, the way it was.
The life I got today is, you know, it's one, I got a great wife, kids. You know, I would never have it if it wasn't for Narcotics Anonymous and the people that came before me, the Jimmy Kennons and the Jack Whaleys, you know, and the people who started Narcotics Anonymous weren't professionals. They were just addicts. Addicts that had a dream, addicts that wanted to stay clean, addicts that wanted to carry the message to other people.
Remember me. I'm responsible for my own recovery. And I'm responsible to do the best I can not to maintain a positive attitude and searching for a word, I don't know, and the ability to accept what's given to me. And when I say that, it's not given to me, but what, you know, I had polio when I was a kid, and they thought I got out of it unscathed, but, you know, when I started in my 50s, I think a rebound happened, and then I had smoked, and I haven't smoked for 30 years, but still, you know, between those two combinations, I've got some problems. But it's up to me to maintain a positive attitude and not get into self-pity and not to depend on a higher power and not other people, but yet be open to other people. It's up to me to not whine and snivel, because I don't want to be somebody who you ask me, how are you doing, Sally? Well, I'm not breathing very well. You know, I just don't want to be that kind of person. That's not what Narcotics Anonymous has given me. And I wanted to use that gift to the best of my ability. Now I may end up whining and sniveling, I don't know, but I'm not doing it at this point. And I'm not willing to do that at this point. Then I think the more open you are, the more open people are to being there for you.
Can you see the value in a project like this?
Oh, yes. Yes. Yeah. See, this is something that there's a lot of meetings and a lot of places and a lot of addicts that don't get to information days and dinosaur days and conventions and all. They don't get to none of that.
Yeah.
See? And to be able to have something and say, this was what started it. This is your heritage. You understand? Your heritage is important.
I've made friends that are lasting friends, not just these fly-by-night, but lasting friends. They're like brothers and sisters and that sort of thing. And you never find that sort of thing except in our programs. You know, we find something here that is different, and I wouldn't give it up for anything in the world. You know? And I believe in both programs. I sincerely believe in them. I believe that if you stick with them, if you go to the meetings and you stick with these programs and try to do the best you possibly can on the steps and so, your life has got to, just has to be better.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't think of any way I can improve my life. I think I've reached nirvana.
Sweet. Sweet, man.
I just like to maybe 20, 30 years from now, some newcomers could look at these videos and, you know, get kind of a sense of what the fellowship was like and the spirit of Narcotics Anonymous and the energy we had and the way we helped each other and the way we went about it and the way we didn't kiss newcomers' asses, you know. Told them, you know, sit down, shut the fuck up and listen. But not all of them, but certain people, you know. I would just like to see them get a sense of our history.
What I'd like to say to the newcomer, this program worked from the beginning and it'll work today and it'll work in the future. There's basic things, and forget about service structures, politics, or anything else. If you come in here, you live the steps to the best of your ability, you talk about what's going on and go to the meetings, it's going to work for you too. There's no real secret to this thing except keep coming back and do what you're told to do, you know, by people that are healthy. I mean, imitate, and I don't like to use words winners and losers because that denotes a little negativity, but the people who are doing it and living steps in their life and seem to have healthy things, follow their suggestions and their advice. Don't follow the suggestion of somebody with 15, 10, 20 years clean waiting outside a detox store to pick on the girl before she gets too smart to know what's going on. Stick with the people who are working this program, not only by their mouth what they share at meetings, what they're doing in their lives. It's not about coming here and making $1 million or becoming an actor. It's about coming here and staying clean, and then if you have aspirations and goals, you will attain them because you have the ability. You may not attain them, but you have the ability to do it, and you're not going to go out and get shit-faced again. It's just not going to happen if you follow the program. The program, the only thing I say is nothing's going to change. 100 years from now, drugs may change, and they've changed in my life. Today we have designer drugs. We have drugs that I have no concept of what they are, but I know what they do. They do the same thing that the drugs that I used do. It affects my feelings. Those things will never change. The chemicals will change. I mean, when I was a young kid, we're all going to school and sniffing on Cabana all day long, it did the same thing to me as any other drug that they're going to invent and done. It's just a different delivery system. The steps work, the program works, meetings work. Follow the people that are doing it and living it in their life.
The struggle, it was a struggle the first year, really a struggle. I mean, just a struggle. Sometimes it was like touching God. Those were the times, you know, when I said, if I feel this bad tomorrow, I'm going to use. And then somehow the next day would be okay, and then I'd do it again and again. And I just went back and forth like that. I was driving home from my job, and by the time I had a year, I had it fairly, I mean, I was making reasonable money. I wasn't on the low end of minimum wage now. And I was making fairly decent money. I was waiting tables in a Denny's, but I was making enough money, you know. And it was okay, it felt good. And I was driving home from work, and all of a sudden the voices stopped. Something happened. They had been less and less and less, and something happened. And I said, okay, what do you got to say about that?
Yeah.
You know, because there they are.
Your
And
friends.
it's quiet. And I pulled over to the side of the road and I cried. And, you know, I think that's when the miracle of the program really happened for me.
You should have met me.
I'll attest to that.
You should have met me, motherfucker. You'd be a lot happier. But you could say to yourself, maybe I'll never be that sick. No. I would say to that person to embrace this program with everything you've got. Don't take anything for granted. Don't take anybody in your life for granted. Don't take your loved ones for granted. And most of all, do not take this program for granted. The concepts of these steps haven't changed since 1953. And hopefully nobody will ever change them. And the only other thing I'd wish to say to that newcomer when I'm not here is that I wish I could be here. I really wish I could be here to give you a hug. And let you know the war's over and welcome home.
Once you get here, stay here. The only actual requirement is you stay clean and sober. You don't use and you don't drink ever again, no matter what. It doesn't matter what happens to you. You know, my daughter died at age 44. My mother died at age 100, and my wife died at 72. She had Alzheimer's for 12 years. If I'd been clean and sober, I wouldn't have been able to take care of her. You know, I would have lost my license to practice. I would have probably, you know, been in prison. I was arrested 20 times when I was drinking and using. You know, I fought all my cases and won them all. It's surprising. Surprising. Nowadays it wouldn't be that way. These prosecutors are professionals, you know. You can't do what you used to do.
Right.
You know, but it's been a really, really good life for me. I've really enjoyed being clean and sober, and I think being real active in the program, you know, like 10 meetings a week for the first 5 years. And I was secretary of 5 meetings a week for probably the 5 years or more. And I've stayed active, stayed involved. I've stayed involved in the 502 Club and the 202 Club. I've been a member of both of those the entire time. I pay my dues by the year.
You know, we are all faced with our mortality. And,
No kidding.
you know, 50 years down the road, some newcomers watching this video, what would you most like to say to that person?
It's okay. It's going to be okay. When I don't remember how long I had, but I was coming back from Los Angeles and I was crying about something. I mean, I was just really sobbing. And I don't even remember now what it was. Maybe I don't know what it was. But there was a voice, that recovery voice inside said, it's okay. No matter what, it's okay. And somewhere along the line, we all reached that point, I believe, where we know that no matter how bad it is, no matter whether it's the death of a loved one, no matter whether it's really bad health problems, no matter whether it's financial devastation, no matter what, it's going to be okay. And that's kind of the piece that the program and working a program brings you. And I really, honest to God, believe that with all my heart. I've seen that over and over again, and it's okay. It's really okay.
I hope your heart opens up to Narcotics Anonymous as mine did, as I believe the gentleman in this room did, and has, and I hope you're willing to be of service, whatever that will consist of and need to be 50 years from now, because I can't even begin to imagine what the world will be like 50 years from now. But the disease will be the same. The disease will be the same, and I believe this process will work just as effectively in 50 years as it does and has for the last 60 or so years. I hope I hope you're in the process of making an update on this video in 50 years.
They're a legacy. All I am to the newcomer is their predecessor. That's it, up now. And what they are to me, they're our legacy. So we need to be responsible for what we pass on to that newcomer. You know, because what's passed on that newcomer is what that newcomer is going to pass on to the person that comes in one day after them. And so the newcomer is the one that's going to create our legacy wherever this fellowship goes when I'm gone in a higher place. You know. So that's how I treat that. Be careful with the newcomer.
You know, it's pretty simple.
if a knucklehead like if a knucklehead like me could be, anybody could be. Even you.
It works. It really, really works. You know, this thing really works. They told me, you know, give it a try. If it doesn't work, we'll gladly refund your misery. You know, and it works. And there's so many of us here now that are examples of that. Whole new way of life.
You're in for the greatest experience of your life if you just, it's been quite a party. You know, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me, and I'm not like anybody special. So if you hang in there and get involved, this can be the best thing to ever happen. You can, you know, there isn't anything you can't do if you're clean.
Enjoy the fellowship. You know, it's all about love, but I don't want to hear all that crap. You know, a picture's worth 1,000 words, and it's how we walk. You know, it's how we talk. You're going to talk it, then you need to walk it. And the walk is what's going to be the demonstration.
I hope my grandkids never need this program. And their kids don't need this program. And if they do, I hope that it's here. That the enthusiasm for Narcotics Anonymous doesn't die off. The passion that so many of us have had for it, you know.
I would like to have my great-great-great-grandchild, if they had a problem, be able to go to the same Narcotics Anonymous I was introduced to, you know. We don't do 12-step work anymore. We don't go pick up addicts and take them to meetings. We used to have people kicking on couches, you know. It doesn't happen anymore. It's just like the spirit of Narcotics Anonymous is being diluted.
I would like to see it change. I'd like to see it really follow the principles that it pontificates.
Right.
I think the service structure needs to get more recovery instead of service.
Right.
That ain't gonna happen. You got a machine that's set up and it's gonna run. It's like a robot.
You know, anytime an organization gets large, there's always abuse. And it's good. In the humble beginnings, people are pretty honest, you know, and they're dedicated to each other. They support and help each other. But as things get big, they sort of lose those roots to the foundation that builds strength and integrity. So what are your hopes for things changing in the future and bringing NA back to what it's supposed to be?
You want to know the big one?
Yeah.
Someday that NA and AA don't disagree with each other and we're one fellowship.
That's a good point.
We'd
Very
rule
good
the
point.
fucking world, man.
Okay.
We would have we'd have a spiritual entity in every political body worldwide. I believe that. See, you believe that God sent His Son down. I believe that God sent the program here, the 12 steps, to light up the world.
That's right.
And I think we fucked it up.
Yeah.
I think it got dishonest. I think it
Yeah,
got
we might have
selfish.
messed it up, but we haven't destroyed it. Yet.
Come real close.
Yeah.
We sure mangled the message.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of difference. A lot more respect, a lot more people, a lot more energy, ideas. People are as willing to accept something being gospel like they were before. Before, there's a few old timers, if they said it was, it was, whether it was or not. They believed that they were like the grand poobahs of Narcotics Anonymous, and there isn't any, of course. So now, more structured. The structure allows us the ability to live and learn and grow like it never has before.
I just hope that, again, the hopes are just that this thing continues. No matter what, just continues. I want to see 100,000 people at a convention, not 25,000 people. I want to see it from all countries, not just, even the poorest of the poor country can make it to a Narcotics Anonymous convention. 50 years from now, 100 years from now, when somebody catches this tape, you're going to just say, well, if I was as old as them, I'd quit using too. But
we weren't always this
Well,
old.
yeah, let's last 40 years.
yeah, but all in all, it's, life is good no matter how you look at it. Life is good. It's only as good as you want it to be. If you don't want it to be good, it's not going to be good. Simple as that.
How old are you now, Mel?
I just turned 65 the 3rd of October, and I was born in 1943. When I got this program, I had dark brown hair and all my own teeth.
Wow.
And I was about 100 pounds lighter, maybe 80 pounds lighter. But I'm moving along. God's going to give me another day. I'm just positive of that. I'll breathe another few days. And I hope to breathe long enough to just be a part of more people's lives.
People come into Narcotics Anonymous, they think, oh, here it is. It's always been here, it'll always be here. Nobody really did anything, they just showed up for a meeting and there it was. And I think it's really valuable that people know that, you know what, there's a lot of people that went through a lot of hell for people to have the opportunity. I mean, there's a lot of people that went through much more hell than me, like Jimmy, and people involved in our, even the people in our World Service Office that have served for years that have been ridiculed for what they've done, and they stole the fellowship, all the garbage you hear, but look at the work that they've done, and I know in their heart they have the same passion that I have. And I called one of those people years ago and made amends to them for ridiculing them, putting them down, talking about them, saying they were screwed up, they were doing everything wrong, the fellowship needs to take over this thing. You know what it is? We're all jealous motherfuckers. We all want to be at the top, and we don't know the top's walking through that fucking door. That's where the top really is. And we all want to stand for something, greater than what we are. Because we all want to be something more than what we are. And we want to mean something more than what we feel we mean to ourselves. And then when we even get it, we don't feel we deserve it. So what the fuck was the problem? So, yeah, I think I don't take it. I know that it's really valuable. And even if one addict sees this and appreciates the passion, maybe they can identify with that same passion. And 50 years, 100 years from now, this earth is still here, 200 years from now, an addict will know where he can go, where somebody will give a fuck. No matter where they came from, what they've done, somebody will open their arms and give them a hug and tell them welcome. And I think it's really, be nice if you could interview everybody who walked through the doors. And it's sad that this wasn't done way before so many of us who have laid groundwork have already died. And we didn't get to hear their love and what they went through to be a part of this thing. So yeah, history should never be forgotten. So hopefully this will be there for addicts forever to be able to see what really happened. And I don't know if anybody really knows what really happened. Everybody's got their own experience of what they went through. And so to gather all that information that can be gathered, and so much of it's missing already because of the people that have died clean in Narcotics Anonymous, that gave so much of their heart, their love, their time for these rooms, and the addict that still suffers. It's sad that that wasn't captured. So that's what I feel, that this is definitely not a waste of time.
Yeah, my name is Tommy Higgins, and I'm just really grateful that I got asked to do or to be involved with this project. I think the project would have gone on and on if it wasn't for the death of one of the people that was inspired. Gene Haig inspired us. We heard all over the fellowship that we need to hear the history. We need to hear the history. And finally, a group of men took the task and has done this. Some of the film, people have died that we interviewed. So we want to thank, Lou Pollock, George Perry was gone, Gene Lakakis, Bob Barrett, Sally, and others that we filmed, and some that we couldn't get to. The interviewers have been all over the country trying to seek out the predecessors and get the story. This film, it's not cut. So nobody could say, we're not saying it's a for or against anything. We have people in this film that disagree with each other. And that's what makes it true to the spirit. But I think without doing this, we would have lost our history. The history is being told through people's mouths who were there. And sometimes they saw it differently. So, man, this has been it's a beautiful film. If you saw this, it's a beautiful, beautiful film. Indiana Joe drove a lot of hours with Gene. Tommy Williams kept the thing going. His idea was just to give it to the fellowship. Spoke with World Service, and that didn't seem to work out. So he got down a little bit, and then he got up a little bit. There was a lot to this, men sleeping in a one-bedroom room together, trying to go to conventions and not really hearing the conventions because we needed to talk to the speakers. It was fun. The traveling was fun. It was a great experience. But I hope that people can see. I hope we conveyed well enough to you that this is a project of love, as was NA. We got to see how a few guys met a few guys who met a few guys and told them about this fellowship of Narcotics Anonymous. And wherever you are looking at this, you come from them few guys. And we wanted you to know how it came about and why you're sitting in a room watching this film, why you get to go to a meeting at 7 or 8 o'clock and the doors are open. It's because these guys, they just kept on going with courage and mostly love. Gene told us all the time that it's all about the newcomer. There's nothing more important than the newcomer. So at the very end, you'll see in his deathbed, he had a few breaths left, actually. He held on to his last newcomer. And that was powerful. His family cried, I cried, and he grabbed on to that newcomer's hand. And today she's still clean. So with that, my hope is that you understand that none of us are professional. We did the very best we can, and we really need your help to keep this thing going. This is not a one-segment project. As we watched, we got ideas on where it needs to go next and where it needs to go after that. So the whole fellowship is going to be involved. you might be sitting here the next time. Because it's now our program, this has been our project. And with that, I just want to thank this group for letting me just even be a part of it. I can see many, many more road trips and many more interviews. It's given me a brand new energy, and I'm asking you maybe to get involved with it too.